And Mr. Samir Meharali, please put your hands together.
How's it going, everybody? Okay. All right, so in this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about the customization and managing your user aspect within the CRM system. To really get a good understanding about why these things are important and how to adapt the system, we're going to go with a quick exercise here. So I'm going to bring up the organization structure of a company, and I want you guys to throw out some names of ones that you think this might be associated to. So this one over here. There's one person who's at the very core of the company and has their hand in multiple places. They're not really reporting upwards necessarily, but more of like a collaborative effort where they have directors and then people that kind of collaborate together all at once. Actually, this one's going to be Apple, with of course Tim Cook in the center of the whole thing, or Steve Jobs. The next one here is a little bit different. It's a little bit more structured a little bit differently. You have a more rigid type of structure, and basically how people report upwards, and there's a little bit of collaboration and cross structuring involved. This one is what we think Google's all about. Now, this one's my favorite because it's pretty funny. So there's a really rigid structure here as well, and they're kind of separated into different things, and when something goes wrong, the other department tries to point the finger at the other one, Microsoft. And here's this last one. So it's not really organized in a lateral way, or someone that's mainly involved in a bunch of different things like Apple, but it's more collaborative. There's a lot of different things going on at the same time, and a lot of collaboration that's sort of involved. And that's us, actually. So as you guys kind of could tell so far from the keynotes and everything like that, we have a lot of organizational structure, but at the same time, everyone's doing something unique and not really a level-by-level reporting structure. So the main takeaway here is that each organization, from anyone like us to another company that we kind of talked about to even you guys sitting next to each other, your organization is going to be completely different. The things that you need to collect from customers, or even the way that you guys sell or how you interact with your own employees, is going to be completely different from the person sitting next to you. And the reason that that's important is because the CRM, kind of like what Ricky was saying, gives you a templated version of what we say is a generalized process and a generalized way to use the CRM, but it is in no way encouraged to use it in that same light. So when we talk about some of the features in this presentation, we'll focus on how we can adapt the system to fit what you guys are currently doing, and not the other way around, where your company has to change to fit what a software is supposed to be doing. So what we're going to be talking about first is going to be the different methodologies involved. So if we think about it and bring in what Ricky was talking about, it's defined by people, your process, and your performance as well. So in this presentation, we're going to focus on the people and the process side. So let's first talk about the people. So as we know, there's two different types of things set up whenever you add a user inside the system. So each user, whether they're a sales rep or a manager, whoever they might be, has a dedicated profile and a role. And so simply put, profiles determine what each user has access to do in the system. So what buttons they can click, what actions that they can do, what they're supposed to be doing inside the CRM system, right? And so by default, essentially, you can basically restrict anything from them exporting data or deleting information to even getting as granular as to say that, hey, I don't want them to be able to see this certain field for a deal. I don't want them to be able to change the dollar amount of a specific field. Those are things that you can actually set restrictions on for a specific type of user. And when you sign up for the system, you, by default, get these two different profiles, administrator and standard. So when you, as a user, sign up for the CRM system, and I'm going to go ahead and jump into my account here and zoom in a little bit, the first thing that you'll be able to see and sort of configure under the setup and then users and control section is these different profiles. So administrator and standard are their two different profiles that are already set up inside the system. Administrator is someone like yourself that set up the CRM and has full access to everything. And as you can see, within a profile, there's a bunch of different things that you can turn on, turn off, and so on, just by hitting these little green buttons. But an administrator has full access by default. The standard profile also has some of those things set up for people already, but you do have some things restricted out of the box. So all these different setup sections that you see here, they're all grayed out because they don't have access to that information by default. But there might be some administrator privileges that certain people need, like a manager or an executive, but they don't need every single administrative feature, right? So you can create custom profiles that determine what that type of user has access to do. And so I created this custom profile called sales, and I went ahead and modified some of these things. So I can go in and say, okay, they can actually see some campaigns, but they can't delete them. I don't want them to be able to delete other stuff either. So I'm going to go ahead and turn those things off. And then I can go in and also configure whether they have access to import data, send emails. I don't want them to delete stuff, so I'm going to take that part out. And I don't want them to be able to maybe export information and take it to another company. Of course, I want to make sure that that never happens. So you'll essentially have that ability to turn on and turn off access on each specific profile. And you can create a bunch of these as well. So that'll essentially give you the ability to create specific permissions for each type of user. So if you have a manager, an executive, a director, you could basically create different profiles for each type. And the same thing applies for roles. So aside from a profile that's given to a user, the other thing that you're going to be able to give to a user is their role in the system. And that, simply put, defines what access of data that they have to see. So profiles determine what each user has access to do, and roles determine what they have access to see. What it also does is actually define the hierarchy and the structure of your organization. Who reports to who answers what, and what data that they can actually see from there. So if we were to visualize one of these hierarchies, the CEO at the top has pretty much access to everything. They can see every customer, they can see every deal, and they should be able to see every deal. But if we get down a little bit and go to maybe the director of sales over here, then we're actually able to see that they have two different managers reporting to them as well. So they have a European manager and a US manager, and then underneath that, we can get also a little bit more granular. So if we think about the California sales rep, that person can only see data, what's assigned to them. They can only see the stuff that they're handling, what they're responsible for. They're not going to be able to see the same data as the Georgia person or the Florida person, but they will be able to just see their own information. But the manager can see their own data as well as the people that report underneath them as well. So you can have that data restriction set up between the level of roles and who has access to what as well. So there's a little bit more oversight that can be developed with these different roles. And how that's set up inside the system is when we go back over to the setup and then users and control section, we'll go to security control, and then we're going to go over to this role section here. And so this company that I have inside the system, I have myself as the CEO, and then I created a manager and a sales team role as well. And so from here, I can go ahead and create a new role, and I'll just call it the lead development reps. And so I can choose who they report to, and I can go ahead and choose another role, and I'll say that since they passed all their leads over to the sales team once they're qualified, I can go ahead and say that they report to the sales team. Now, one other cool thing, and this is also very important to note, there's this share data with peers section. What that means is that if there's multiple people in this same role, and you want them to be able to see each other's data, you can go ahead and click that, and everyone who's in that same LDR, lead development rep role, will be able to see each other's data. But if you don't want that to happen, then make sure to keep that off, because that way, if I have 3 lead development reps, LDR1 is only going to be able to see the data assigned to LDR1. LDR2 and 3 will only be able to see their own data as well. But if we do turn that on, then they can see each other's data. So that's also an option as well. But as soon as that sales team structure is created for LDR to sales team, then anyone in the sales team role would be able to see down below as well. So that's kind of how the role structure works inside the system. Now, aside from the role hierarchy that you could set up by position, a relatively new feature that we came out with is that you can also move that from role-based permission to user reporting permission. We're going to talk about this a little bit in tomorrow's presentation, but essentially, instead of assigning users to a role, you can assign a direct manager to that other user. So it cuts some of the, it makes a shortcut essentially so that you can have LDR1, for example, report to manager 3 instead of a, granular relationship between managers and LDRs. So you can kind of take a shortcut with that. And we're going to talk about it tomorrow in the advanced session. And some of the other things that we're going to be talking about as well include data sharing rules. So now that we've established how data can be restricted, there's going to be other ways to be able to make sure that some people have access to some data outside of that. One of the problems is maybe they need to have access to that information, but they don't necessarily need to make changes to it or be able to even see it at all. So we could set up sharing permissions and rules across the entire domain. We'll also talk a little bit about setting up territories, having different companies set up within one CRM account. What people end up kind of doing is using this territory management feature to get away with that as well. So if they need to manage whether it be different sales teams within an organization or having 2 different companies, you can kind of get away with that using the territory management feature. Now that we've kind of talked about the user side, the next thing that we're going to talk about is customizing the platform and adding in some of those custom fields. So the key benefits, again, for talking about customization is that you can cut out some of the clutter that's already in the system. So there's a bunch of fields that are already set up whenever you sign up for a Zoho CRM account. So things like fax number. I don't know if anyone uses a fax anymore, but Skype ID, Twitter account, those might be important, those might not be important. You can go ahead and take those out. So you can cut out some of the clutter, making your life and your agent's life easier so they don't have to get bogged down with too much information that they need to fill out. And then, of course, if you need to make certain things that are more specific to your business, then creating those so that it is more applicable is always the most important thing. And then you basically make it more effective for your business purposes. So by going into that, what we're first going to talk about is setting up some of the baseline stuff, so personal and organization information. Manny touched on this a little bit, but I'm just going to rope into a quick demo here. Over in this setup menu, we can go in and change some of the details over in personal settings and company details. So that's things like whenever someone signs up and is added as a user, then they can go in and change what their time zone is and also add their own email signature. So whenever they send out emails inside the CRM, then they'd be able to include their own signature. And if you already have one in your email account, that's awesome because you can go ahead and copy and paste that and put it into this one so it looks the exact same way. If you have your logo in there or any other links, then you just copy and paste your signature that's already in your email account, paste it over here, and you're pretty much all set. And then the same thing for company details. This can set up things like the organization's time zone, and if you do operate in multiple currencies, what your business hours are, and of course that hierarchy preference. So if you want to change from the role-based hierarchy that we were talking about to direct reporting, then you can manipulate those as well. So there's a lot of different things that you can kind of set up from here. Now, getting a little bit more specific, let's talk a little bit about modifying your layout. So over in this section, all the different modules that we're talking about, leads, contacts, accounts, so on, we'll have the ability of renaming some of those modules. And then within each module, we'll have the ability of creating and customizing some of the fields and setting up permissions for those fields. So if certain profiles, like my sales profile or my lead development rep profile, if I don't want them to be able to make changes to some fields, then we can set up those permissions within the customization menu as well. And then let's go ahead and just quickly define some of the most important modules inside the system. So first, we have leads. That's going to be the first point of contact. And then contacts and accounts. So leads essentially are converted to contact and accounts, as you guys know, and then you can also create a deal or an opportunity for that contact and account. Now, let's stop here for a second. If you guys are B2B, then this structure is great. If you're B2C, you don't really need the accounts module, as we were talking about before. So one of the other things that you can do within the system is be able to scrap some of the modules that you don't really need. And so for a B2C organization, where you're selling directly to individuals and not just other businesses, you can go ahead and get rid of some of those modules that don't really apply, including the account section. And so you'll be able to do that. So those are the core modules of the CRM. And of course, there's a bunch of other ones, as you guys have experienced as well. So now we can talk about tying in that process, where we talk about generating, qualifying, and selling, where we generate leads inside the system and tying in what Ricky was discussing, qualifying them by updating that lead status field and converting them over into a potential deal or opportunity. And so when that takes place, we're able to understand what information needs to be collected, like contact information, sales details, and is there any information that's absolutely mandatory? Things that we can't really function until we find out this information? And then also, is there anything that's not already in the CRM? So I'm going to go ahead and move back over to my demo account here. And the next thing that we're going to just quickly jump into is this, back over into the setup menu, we're going to go into customization and hit modules and fields. Now the first thing, if we need to get rid of any of the modules, is that we can hit this little organize modules button, and that'll allow us to get rid of any of the specific things that don't really apply. So if we needed to, we can go ahead and take those out. That doesn't mean that they're deleted. You can always bring them back later. So it's not saying that they're deleted at all, they're just deactivated. So you can always bring them back if you need to. Now you can also go in and rename some of these modules as well. So if the deals term doesn't really fit or make too much sense, you can go ahead and rename it. So you'll have that ability as well. And when we talk about some of the things like stages and lead status that are going to be updated, in our next presentation after the break, we'll talk a little bit about that. And then if we go into one of these as well, we can go into this layout page and basically change some of the fields here. If there's anything that I really don't need, like maybe Twitter account isn't that important, I can go ahead and hit this little 3-dot button over here and hit remove field. And that'll actually allow me to deactivate that field from the system. Again, that's not going to delete that field, it's just going to remove it. You will have the option to delete other fields like custom fields later on, but it's just going to go over to this little unused field section, which you can always bring back later. Now, if there's something that's absolutely important, like email address is the primary method of communication for me, I can go ahead and mark it as required, which means that a lead cannot be created or saved until someone puts in that email address field, right? So you'll have that ability to kind of set up that requirement for those as well. Now, aside from that, I can also bring in something that's a little bit more specific to the information that I need to collect. So in this account, I sell automobiles. So I basically set up a bunch of different custom fields for vehicle information. So when I have someone that comes into my dealership, then there's all these different things that I need to collect from a lead to show what they're interested in. So what type of car that they want, what their budget is, and so I have a couple of drop downs when they want to make a decision by, so that's a date field. And so you can use these different field types on the left to trigger or put in what those are going to be. So if I need a decision date, I can drag and drop over a date field. If I need the budget that they have, I can drag over a currency. Or if it's just something that I need for them to fill out, I can just have a normal single line text field. So there's all these different things that are supported that you can go ahead and bring over. And there are a couple of advanced custom fields, things like lookups and formulas. But as you can see, I'm able to create those things that are more specific to this dealership business that I have that I need to collect. And so when I try to go into creating a new lead, and I go over to my lead section here, then I'll be able to basically see those specific pieces of information that I need to collect from a consumer lead that I have here. Now, you guys already noticed this, but I'm going to talk about it real quick here. You also have the ability of setting up what we call as multiple layouts inside the system. So essentially what this allows you to do is that if you, for example, sell both to businesses and consumers, but they're completely separate sales pipelines, then you can create different layouts within the system so that the information that's collected is a little bit different. So if I go back over here, I sell both to businesses and consumers. So I have this little drop-down list here that says business leads, and I collect information like the company name and their website, their annual revenue, their industry, which is all specific information that I need to collect when I'm talking to a business. But when I move over to a consumer, there's not that much information that I need to collect that's the same. I don't have the company name field anymore. I don't have the industry or the website field because those don't really apply to a consumer lead that I'm selling to. So you can basically set up these different layouts and pages for the different types of people that you sell to. And that same thing applies not only for leads, but over in contacts and deals or any other module that you guys are using. You'll have that ability to change what the layout looks like for each and every single one. Okay. Aside from the modules that are already available inside the system, you also have the ability of creating your own custom modules. Now, this is getting a little bit more on the advanced side, but I just wanted to touch on it for a minute because if you do end up measuring anything else that's outside the scope of the CRM, maybe it's things like reservations or properties or anything else that there isn't already a pre-built module for, you can go ahead and create your own and then have it relate back to maybe a lead or a contact. So you'll have that ability by using a custom module, and it kind of looks like this, where it creates a new one from scratch, and you can start dragging and dropping things over, like those custom fields that you see on the left, and you'll have that ability to just make things a little bit more specific. So if I needed a module for this dealership to track vehicles, then I can have a whole setup module for those things as well. And then the last thing that I'm going to be talking about here is the related lists within a record. So aside from what's already set up inside the system when you generate a lead, as you can see here, if I click on one of these records inside the system, there's a bunch of different fields that are displayed, and those are the things that I essentially filled out. So like the pricing information, some of the other custom fields. And then underneath each person is where I could see some of the other related items, so like activities and close activities and emails and things like that. Within each and every one of these different related items, you can go ahead and change some of the other things as well. So some of these might not even apply. So what you can go ahead and do is actually over here on the left-hand side, you have this little pencil icon next to the related lists. So like notes, attachments, and everything. You can hit this little pencil icon, and if there's anything that you don't really need, you can go ahead and take it out. Maybe social media isn't really that important, so I can go ahead and unselect it. And again, it's not going to be removed or deleted. You can always bring it back. And I can also change the order of them. So if emails are super important and also open activities, then I can go ahead and select those and move them up on the page as well. And then within each one of these related items, I can go ahead and change what's actually displayed. So I have a bunch of activities here, like tasks and events and everything, and I can choose what's actually displayed within this list. So instead of maybe modified time, I can go ahead and take that out, but I want to go ahead and put in something else like the priority or the or another option here. So I can go ahead and choose exactly what I would want and maybe move this up a little bit. And then now it kind of changes what that look and feel shows up as. So I can prioritize those different records and then sort them by priority and all that good stuff. So you'll be able to change and modify those different related items underneath a record inside the system as well. The last thing is going to be filtering through your data. So when we're talking a little bit about some of the different ways to look at that list of information inside the system, we also have the ability of drilling down on a specific set of data and information. Now, there's a few different ways to do that. When we move back over to the CRM section here, as you can see, right now I'm taking a look at a list of all the different leads that I have in my system. It's not really organizing the data in any specific way right now, but when I go in, I can go ahead and change some of the columns that are added. So instead of just having lead name, email, and status and source, if there's other things that I want to go ahead and pick and choose, I can go ahead and select those. So if I needed to track their location information a little bit more, I can go ahead and grab their city and state, and maybe I need to grab their title as well. So then I can go ahead and save those, and then that information will be populated for me as well when I'm taking a look at that data. On top of that, I can also drill down on that data as well using the filters that we see on the left-hand side. So if I wanted to maybe see leads that have been reached out to in a specific amount of time, so if they've had an activity in the past couple of days, or if someone sent an email to them and they opened that email recently. So based on some of the CRM activities, you can drill down on that type of data as well and apply a filter for it so you just see that specific list of information. And then on top of that, instead of just looking at all my leads, I can also create a view for that same type of filter. So essentially, I have a view for Texas. So that shows me all the leads that I have in that specific state. And so I can basically set up a criteria for this that says if the state is Texas, then I want that to be populated in this information. You can add in more and more filters if you want to as well. So if you wanted to say if the state is Texas and the lead status is not contacted, then you can go ahead and set that up as well. So you can get pretty granular on the amount of control that you have with these different pieces of information and choose exactly what you would want to see in this list. And I can go ahead and change this name to lead stat or Texas not contacted leads or something. So I'll have that ability as well. All right, perfect. Now the last thing here is on top of the normal view that we have for setting up these different lists and filters, you also have what we call as a Kanban view, and that allows you to see things like your deals set up in the pipeline by the different stages that they're in. And aside from the different actual views and things that we set up, you could still filter the data the same way, but it pretty much shows your pipeline split up into the different stages that they're in, so you can see how much revenue is sitting in each one of these stages. And you can customize this view if you want to as well. So over in this little Kanban view settings section, you can go ahead and pick and choose what you would have displayed over here as well. So if you wanted to take closing data out, but maybe add some other details, you can go ahead and add that information in as well and how it's split by and everything. So, and of course, you can also drill down by the type of pipeline or the different types of layouts that you have inside the system. So there's a lot of different ways to filter and look at some of the most important data inside the CRM. And so that pretty much wraps up my time for the custom views and also this presentation and everything. But yeah, that's pretty much everything that I have here.